The wake-up call was finding this startling statistic that web usage in the spring of 1994 was growing at 2,300% a year. Things just don't grow that fast. It's highly unusual. And that set me about thinking what kind of business plan might make sense in the context of that growth. I think there are a couple of things, and one of the things that everybody should realize, and that is probably the single most important factor, is that any startup company that turns into a substantial company over the years never lose track of the fact that there was a lot of luck involved in that. So, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, there are a lot of people who are very smart, very hardworking. Very few ever have, the planetary alignment that leads to a tiny little company growing into something substantial. So that requires not only a lot of planning, a lot of hard work, a big team of people who are all dedicated, but it also requires that not only the planets align, but that you get a few galaxies in there aligning too. And that's certainly what happened to us. Our timing was good. Our choice of product categories, books was a very good choice. And we did a lot of analysis on that to pick that category as the first best category for e-commerce online. But there were no guarantees that that was a good category. At the time we launched this business, it wasn't even crystal clear that the technology would improve fast enough that ordinary people, non-computer people, would even want to bother with this technology. So that was good luck. So there are a whole bunch of things that have to sort of align to make it work. I went to my boss and said to him, I'm going to go do this crazy thing, and I'm going to start this company selling books online. And this is something that I had already been talking to him about in a sort of more general context. But then he said, let's go on a walk. And we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park in New York City. And the conclusion of that was this, he said, this actually sounds like a really good idea to me. But it sounds like it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And he convinced me to think about it for 48 hours before making a final decision. And so I went away and was trying to find the right framework in which to make that kind of big decision. And I'd already talked to my wife about this, and she was very supportive and said, look, you can count me in 100%. Whatever you want to do. It's true, she had married this kind of fairly stable guy in a stable career path, and now he wanted to go do this crazy thing, but she was 100% supportive. So it really was a decision that I had to make for myself, and the framework I found, which made the decision incredibly easy, was what I called, which only a nerd would call, a regret minimization framework. So I wanted to project myself forward to age 80 and say, okay, now I'm looking back on my life. I want to have minimized the number of regrets I have. And I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I was not going to regret having wanted, trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not ever having tried. And I knew that that would haunt me every day. And so when I thought about it that way, it was an incredibly easy decision. And I think that's a very good, it's if you can project yourself out to age 80 and sort of think, what will I think at that time? It gets you away from some of the daily pieces of confusion. I left this Wall Street firm in the middle of the year. When you do that, you walk away from your annual bonus. And that's the kind of thing that in the short term can confuse you. But if you think about the long term, then you can really make good life decisions that you won't regret later. Most regrets, by the way, are acts of omission and not commission. I think most people when they're 80 years old, you can do bad things. You can go murder somebody, and that would be bad, and that would be an act of commission that you would regret. But most, everyday, ordinary, non-murderers, their big regrets are omissions. Well, that blank sheet of paper stage is one of the hardest stages, and one of the reasons it's hard is because at that stage there's nobody counting on you but yourself. One of the things that is very motivating, today it's easy because we've got millions of customers counting on us, and thousands of investors counting on us, and then thousands of employees all counting on each other. But in that beginning stage, it's really just you, and you can quit any time. Nobody's going to care. And so you set about doing the simple things first. So you want to start a company. Well, the first thing you do is you should write a business plan. And so I did that. I wrote about a 30-page business plan. I wrote a first draft. In fact, I wrote the first draft on the car trip from the East Coast to the West Coast, and that is very helpful. Now, the business plan won't survive its first encounters with reality. It will always be different. The reality will never be the plan, but the discipline of writing the plan forces you to think through some of the issues and to get sort of mentally comfortable in the space. Then you start to understand, if you push on this knob, this will move over here, and so on. And so that's the first step. Tried to get a lot of the little housekeeping details done even before we arrived in Seattle. Called an attorney, actually. I called a friend who lived in Seattle, asked if he recommended an attorney. He said yes, he recommended his divorce lawyer. But that's who we used. It was a general practitioner and a small guy, a sort of small sole practitioner. He incorporated the company. He asked me on the cell phone, what name would you like the company incorporated under? I said, Cadabra, as in abracadabra. And he said, cadaver? And I knew then that was not going to be a good name. So we went ahead and incorporated it under that name. We changed it about 3 months later. I stopped in San Francisco and interviewed vice presidents of engineering, because that was going to be an important long lead time item. We needed to build the technology that would run the store. And found the person who turned out to be the most important person ever in the history of Amazon.com on that trip, a guy named Shel Kappan, who built all of our early systems with help from others, but he really sort of architected them and engineered them and just did a fantastic job. So that, so the initial hiring, writing the business plan, the initial hiring, getting the company incorporated, all these are, they're very, in a way, they're sort of, simple, almost pedestrian tasks, but that's how you start, one step at a time. The first sort of initial startup capital for Amazon.com came primarily from my parents, and they invested a large fraction of their life savings in what became Amazon.com. And, that is was a very bold and trusting thing for them to do, because they didn't, my dad's first question was, what's the internet? Okay, so he wasn't making a bet on this company or this concept. He was making a bet on his son, as was my mother. So, and I told them that I thought there was a 70% chance that they would lose their whole investment, which was a few $100,000. And they did it anyway. And I thought I was giving myself triple the normal odds, because, there's really, if you look at the odds of a startup company succeeding at all, it's only about 10%. Here I was giving myself a 30% chance.